Awaken your spirit chosen ones. Some truths don't arrive with warning signs. They arrive disguised as jokes. That's the strange thing about life. The moment you say something casually, almost playfully, that's the moment life decides to take you seriously. There's an old psychological finding that people reveal more truth in their jokes than in their explanations, and you proved it without even trying. You said it with a grin, throwing it out like a harmless comment, and everyone around you relaxed because they assumed you were just being dramatic, ridiculous, or you as usual. But now there's a shift they didn't see coming, a shift that has them blinking twice, replaying the moment you said it, and wondering if you somehow saw the future while they were too busy laughing. It's funny how people treat your words like decoration, until those same words start growing legs and walking into reality. Suddenly, the joke isn't a joke. Suddenly, that harmless line has turned into a full-blown prophecy, and everyone who dismissed you is scrambling for emotional seatbelts. It's almost comedic if you think about it. You drop one casual statement and unintentionally trigger a psychological earthquake. Now they're acting like they were always supportive, rewriting history at Olympic speed, because the truth is catching up a little too fast for their comfort. And that's what this topic is really about. How people lose their balance when the version of you they mocked becomes the version of you they can't ignore. How a single playful statement, once brushed aside, turns into reality so undeniable that they're left stunned, confused, and honestly a little embarrassed. This isn't just an intro. This is the moment the joke stops being entertainment and starts becoming evidence. Number one, they laughed because they thought your limits were permanent. People often respond with laughter when they think they've already figured you out. Their laughter wasn't just entertainment, it was confidence. Confidence that you would stay exactly where you were, doing exactly what they expected. They saw your joke as proof that you didn't take yourself seriously, and it reassured them. It confirmed their quiet belief that your potential had a ceiling, and that ceiling was comfortably low. What they didn't realize was that you were in a stage they couldn't understand, a stage where growth was happening quietly, slowly, and without any flashy announcements. The joke landed because they felt safe. They believed your limits were fixed, like a label glued onto you that you would never peel off. They thought the version of you standing in front of them was your final form, and that any talk of bigger things was just you being playful or unrealistic. People are quick to laugh when the idea of you changing threatens the role they've assigned you in their minds. And once they assume your position is permanent, they treat any bold words from you like comedy, not possibility. But progress has a way of catching people off guard, especially when it doesn't fit their script. The moment your joke started inching toward reality, the laughter got uncomfortable. They weren't laughing at the joke anymore. They were laughing at the gap between who they thought you were and what you were becoming. And when that gap widened, their laughter turned into silence, then confusion, and eventually disbelief. Your growth forced them to reconsider their certainty. It made them face the fact that their view of you was never accurate. It was convenient. They underestimated you because it kept the world simple for them. But once your life began moving beyond those limits, they realized the joke wasn't a joke at all. It was a warning that you were never meant to stay where they placed you. And now that the truth is out in the open, the only thing collapsing faster than their laughter is their confidence in their own assumptions. Number two, your joke exposed their comfort in the old version of you. When you said it as a joke, they didn't just hear the words. They felt relief. They felt comfort in the familiar shape of you, the version they had already learned how to handle, already learned how to predict, already learned how to keep in a safe little box. Your joke fit perfectly into that box, and so they laughed, not because it was funny, but because it reassured them that nothing was changing, that their understanding of you was still intact. People get attached to the old versions of others the same way they get attached to old routines. It's easy, it's predictable, it requires no adjustment, and it keeps their own sense of control intact. What they didn't realize is that comfort is a fragile thing, and growth shatters it quickly. When your joke started turning into truth, when you started moving even a little beyond what they were comfortable with, something in them faltered. Not because they suddenly saw greatness in you, but because they lost their grip on the narrative they'd built around you. They could no longer rely on the old script. This is who you are. This is how far you can go. This is how I relate to you. And losing that script feels like losing ground beneath their feet. Their panic isn't about you stepping into something bigger. It's about their inability to adjust to it. They enjoyed the version of you that stayed small enough to fit their expectations and quiet enough not to disturb their own sense of progress. When your joke became real, it forced them to confront something they never wanted to admit. They were comfortable with you as long as you weren't outgrowing them, outshining them, or outdoing the limits they placed on you without even telling you. So now they're spiraling, not because you changed, but because they can't keep up with the new reality. They can't laugh anymore because laughter was their shield, their way of keeping change at a distance. Without that shield, they're standing in the open, feeling exposed, feeling unsure, feeling like they're no longer entitled to the same access, the same closeness, or the same influence they once had. In the end, it's not your growth that rattles them. It's the collapse of the comfort they built on a version of you that was always meant to evolve. Number 3, you didn't surprise them. You destroyed their narrative. When you spoke those words, they didn't treat them like a prediction or ambition. They treated them like a punchline. And because they believed it was just a joke, they tucked it neatly into the story they already told themselves about you. Humans love their stories, especially the ones that make their world feel predictable. They decide who you are, what you can do, and how far you'll go long before you ever get a chance to prove them wrong. So when you started turning that joke into reality, it wasn't shock they felt. It was collapse. The little storyline they built to keep everything simple suddenly fell apart in their hands, and they didn't know how to respond to that kind of chaos. People don't get rattled by success. They get rattled by being wrong. Being wrong is fine when it's about something small, something replaceable. But being wrong about a person, about their potential, their ambition, their future, that hits deeper because it forces them to question their own judgment. When your progress revealed that their entire assessment of you was built on comfort instead of truth, it shook them in a way they weren't prepared for. The funny part is that you didn't do anything dramatic. You didn't come back with fireworks or speeches or grand declarations. You simply kept working, kept showing up, kept proving, quietly at first, then unmistakably, that their narrative had no foundation. And that's what terrified them. Not the achievement itself, but the realization that they had been writing a story with you in it without ever checking if it matched the reality you were living. Now they're staring at a version of you they can't explain with the old excuses or casual jokes they once used. They can't lean on the comfort of, "I knew it was impossible," or "they're just dreaming," because the evidence is standing right in front of them, refusing to be laughed off. When someone destroys a narrative without even meaning to, it leaves the people who depended on that narrative feeling unmoored, like they've lost their place in a book they thought they understood. So no, you didn't surprise them. You simply revealed how fragile their certainty always was. Number 4, they weren't doubting your joke. They were protecting their perception. When they brushed off what you said, it wasn't really about the joke. It was about keeping their own picture of you intact. Doubt was never the real emotion in the room. Comfort was. People hold on to their perceptions like life rafts because those perceptions tell them who you are, how close they can get, how much they need to take you seriously, and how much they can afford to underestimate you without consequences. When you spoke those words, they didn't hear ambition or truth. They heard something that threatened the stability of the identity they built around you. And instead of adjusting, they defended it. It's easier to dismiss someone than to rewrite what you thought you knew. It takes effort to admit you might have misjudged someone, and most people avoid that effort like the plague. So they laughed, rolled their eyes, or nodded like it was cute or unrealistic. Not because they truly believed it was impossible, but because believing otherwise would force them to confront their own shallow understanding. Protecting their perception felt safer than opening their mind. But life has a way of exposing these hidden defenses. When your joke started turning into something real, their internal alarm went off. Not because they suddenly saw danger in your progress, but because they saw danger in losing control over their own story about you. Their confusion, their sudden silence, their uneasy admiration, all of it comes from that same place. They don't know how to act around a truth they never prepared themselves to accept. This is what people fail to understand. Most judgments aren't about us. They're about the people judging. When someone underestimates you, it's usually because overestimating you would require them to grow, reflect, or admit they were wrong. When they double down on their disbelief, they're not protecting logic. They're protecting ego. Now that reality has stepped forward and started waving its hands, they can't hide behind dismissive laughter anymore. The perception they defended has been outgrown, outpaced, and exposed. And watching their own narrative crumble feels like losing a part of their identity because it was built on incomplete information they pretended was absolute. So remember this. When someone doubts your words, look deeper. They're not judging what you said. They're fighting to keep their version of you alive. Number 5, their shock is guilt pretending to be confusion. When they stare at you like they can't decide whether to be proud or embarrassed or silent, understand this: it isn't confusion. It's guilt dressed up in a face that hopes you won't call it out. When you first said it as a joke, they didn't take it seriously, and somewhere in the back of their mind they knew they weren't being fair. But fairness is easy to ignore when you believe it has no consequences. You get to dismiss someone when you're certain they won't prove you wrong. Now that you're proving them wrong, that small forgotten guilt wakes up and starts rattling around inside them. They feel it, but they can't name it. So it comes out as stunned silence, awkward praise, sudden distance, or overeager support that feels like it's coming 5 steps too late. They're not bewildered by your progress. They're remembering every moment they didn't believe in you, every time they treated your ambition like a punchline, every soft laugh that came from underestimating you. Guilt does strange things to people. It makes them replay conversations like they're watching old home videos they wish they could edit. It makes them wish they could go back and take their words seriously. It makes them want to rewrite their own history, even though time refuses to grant rewrites. And when they can't fix it, they panic a little, because they're forced to admit something they've spent years avoiding. They misread you, and their misreading might have mattered more than they wanted to admit. You didn't break them with success. You broke them with accuracy. You became exactly what they treated as impossible, and that forces them into a mirror they never intended to look into. They're not upset because you're rising. They're uneasy because their past behavior doesn't line up with the person they like to imagine themselves to be. So when you see that look, that half smile, that wow, I didn't expect this tone, know what you're really hearing. You're hearing a conscience trying to speak without sounding guilty, You're hearing someone wish they had seen you clearly when it would have cost them nothing to do so. In the end, their confusion isn't about you. It's about them realizing too late that they underestimated something they should have respected from the start. Number 6, they're not scared of your progress. They fear your memory. When people get uneasy as you start rising, it's rarely about what you're becoming. It's about what you might remember. Progress is easy to cheer for when it stays abstract. But progress tied to memory? That's when people start feeling exposed, because memory has a way of holding on to things they wish would fade. When you first spoke that joke, they dismissed it casually, like it was nothing more than entertainment. They weren't thinking about consequences, about how those little dismissals add up, about how a pattern of underestimation leaves marks even when it looks harmless on the surface. They assumed you would forget, or forget to care, or forget how their words shaped the space between you. But you don't forget easily, and that's what unnerves them. People can handle being wrong. They can't handle being remembered, because memory turns mistakes into accountability. Memory turns careless words into something they can't pretend never happened. When they see you climbing, improving, proving yourself, they start wondering, does he remember how I treated him? Does she remember the laughter, the doubts, the jokes at their expense? Does this success come with a long shadow I can't outrun? It's a quiet fear, but it's powerful. It's the fear of being seen clearly after years of hiding behind casual disrespect or low expectations. It's the fear that the person they underestimated might one day hold those moments up like evidence, not out of revenge, but out of honesty. And honesty, when it reveals truth, can feel sharper than anger. What they're really realizing is this: progress doesn't erase the past. It throws it into daylight. And when the past becomes visible, it stops being something they can ignore or rewrite. They can't pretend they were always supportive, always kind, always aware. Your memory forces a confrontation they never wanted. So no, it's not your success that scares them. It's the possibility that you remember more than they hoped. It's the possibility that the person who grew is also the person who noticed everything, even when it wasn't spoken aloud. And that kind of awareness can make anyone uneasy, especially those who built their comfort on underestimating you in the first place. Number 7, your evolution exposes their stagnation. There's something painfully honest about watching someone grow when you've been standing still for too long. Your progress isn't just a good thing for you, it becomes a mirror for them, and mirrors have a way of revealing what people would rather pretend isn't there. When you start moving, learning, improving, building something real, it highlights the gap between who you're becoming and who they've allowed themselves to remain. And that gap can sting more than they'll ever admit out loud. People like to pretend they're fine with other people succeeding, but deep down, most of us measure ourselves against the people we know. It's human. When someone in your circle starts rising, it forces a silent comparison. Am I moving too? Or have I been using comfort as a substitute for progress? And if the answer isn't flattering, it hits like cold water on bare skin. This isn't jealousy in the dramatic sense, it's recognition. Recognition that time has been passing, choices have been dodged, and potential has been left sitting unused like forgotten luggage in a corner. When they laughed at your joke, it wasn't just dismissal. It was reassurance that you weren't going anywhere. Your evolution took that reassurance away. It rewrote the rules. It told them without speaking that staying in the same place is no longer invisible, no longer harmless, no longer something you can hide behind jokes and excuses. Growth has that effect. It forces honesty onto people who weren't ready for it. The result is panic dressed up as confusion, or defensiveness, or sudden emotional distance. They can't admit that what really bothers them is not what you're achieving, but what their lack of movement says about them. They feel obligated to save face, to act like they're above it, like they always knew or like it doesn't matter. But inside, they're feeling the weight of the truth they ignored for years. Evolution is possible, and watching it in someone else makes stagnation harder to defend. Your growth isn't attacking them, but it is exposing something they've been terrified to look at. That staying the same is a choice, not a destiny, and it's a choice they haven't been proud of. So when they squirm, when they pull back, when they can't meet your eyes, remember, it's not you they can't handle. It's what your progress reveals about the life they haven't lived yet. Number 8, they supported you when they thought it was fictional. There's a special kind of encouragement people hand out when they believe it costs them nothing. When your goals sounded like fantasy, when your joke felt like harmless dreaming, they could cheer you on without ever having to confront what it meant. It's easy to say, go for it, when you're certain the dream will stay safely out of reach. It's easy to clap when the story can't possibly rewrite their own reality. Fictional ambition doesn't threaten anyone, it entertains them. But the moment ambition stops being fictional, the tone changes. What once felt like a cute little idea suddenly starts demanding seriousness, commitment, sacrifice, and proof. And those are things people can't support casually. Now your dream isn't a story anymore. It's a force. Now your growth isn't something they can cheer from the sidelines with a smile and a laugh. It's something they have to measure against their own choices. When they told you they believed in you, they weren't lying. They just weren't believing in the same version of reality you were building. They were believing in the safe, imaginary version where nothing actually shifts, where they can stay comfortable and you can stay harmless. But once you stepped out of that imaginary space and into action, their support started to rust, because it was built on fantasy, not on courage or understanding. Now they're confused because the rules changed without warning. They thought supporting you meant enjoying the idea of you succeeding, not dealing with the consequences of you actually succeeding. Real success demands recalibration. Relationships shift, expectations crumble, roles evolve, and people get left feeling like extras in a story they once thought they were co-writing. So when they pull back, when they get quiet, when their enthusiasm feels forced or hollow, it's not betrayal, it's revelation. They're realizing that supporting a real person with real momentum is harder than supporting a character in a daydream. They liked the version of you that could never compete with their own stagnation. They didn't know how to love the version of you that started becoming undeniable. In the end, their support wasn't about you. It was about the comfort of believing you would stay a possibility instead of becoming a fact. Number 9, your joke was the truth you weren't ready to claim. Sometimes we say things lightly because we're afraid of saying them seriously. A joke can be a mask for a desire we haven't built the courage to admit, a dream we're not ready to own, or a direction we feel deep inside but can't yet stand behind without shaking. When you said it, you weren't playing. You were revealing something raw, something real, something that hadn't been given permission to step into the open, and everyone treated it like harmless theatrics because they couldn't imagine that truth would ever come knocking. But truth has a stubborn way of refusing to stay hidden forever. What starts as a throwaway line begins to echo in your mind, shape your action, pull you toward the future you pretended you were joking about. While everyone laughed, you felt something spark. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. And once you started acting on it, even in small ways, the joke began losing its punch because it was turning into purpose. People miss this all the time. Ambition often speaks through humor before it speaks through discipline. Humor lets us test the weight of our own dreams without feeling exposed. It lets us say, "What if?" without committing to the answer. But when you finally answered that question with action, it caught everyone off guard because they thought they were witnessing entertainment, not revelation. Now they look at you like you pulled a rabbit out of a hat, when in reality you simply became the person you hinted at long before they ever paid attention. They don't know how to process it because they never saw the sincerity beneath the laughter. They never noticed that the joke wasn't a shield, it was a signpost. And here's the real twist. The moment it became real, it became undeniable, not just to them but to you. Claiming it turned the dream into responsibility, responsibility into progress, and progress into proof. What they thought was fantasy turned out to be your compass all along. So when they stare in disbelief, remember this: they didn't just miss the punchline, they missed the truth hidden underneath it, the one you finally stepped up to own. Number 10, they fear your potential more than your achievement. Achievement is something people can celebrate because it's already done. It's clean, finished, wrapped up nicely like a gift you can clap for and then go back to your own life. But potential is dangerous. Potential is unfinished business. Potential is possibility. And possibility forces people to imagine what you could become long before they can decide how they feel about it. When you first said it as a joke, they weren't afraid because they didn't take it seriously. Potential felt like smoke, pretty, harmless, insubstantial. But the moment you started proving that it wasn't smoke at all, that it was fire building slowly beneath the surface, they felt something shift. Potential moves in directions people can't map ahead of time, and it disrupts the neat hierarchy they built in their minds. Who's ahead? Who's behind? Who's safe to underestimate? Who's predictable? Achievement can't threaten them because it has boundaries. Potential has none. Potential asks questions like, how far can they go? What happens when they surpass me? What happens when I can't define them anymore? And those questions scare people more than they admit because they expose insecurities they've been ignoring for years. Nobody panics when someone reaches a goal. People panic when they realize the goal they reached wasn't even the beginning. Your potential forces them to confront their own unused potential, their own postponed dreams, their own comfort zones dressed up as destiny. When they see you moving, improving, stacking wins, building momentum, it reminds them of all the things they could have pursued and didn't. That reminder hurts in a place achievement never reaches. So their reactions, the disbelief, the sudden distance, the defensive jokes, the "wow, didn't expect that" comments, all of it isn't about what you've done. It's about what you might do next. It's about the future they can't control and can't predict and can't fit into the old story they told themselves. Potential is a mirror without a frame. It shows people not just who you might become, but who they might have been if they had been brave enough to try. That's why they fear it. Because potential doesn't just change your life. It forces everyone watching to question their own. Number 11. They preferred the version of you that needed their approval. There's a certain comfort people feel when they believe you're still looking to them for validation. It gives them relevance, importance, a sense of influence they can hold on to like a badge. When you're still seeking approval, they get to shape your choices with their comments, their doubts, their encouragement, their little jokes that double as judgments. In that space, you're predictable, manageable, and safely within the orbit they can understand. But once you stop needing that approval, once you start moving because you know where you're going, something in them breaks quietly. Not because they hate your independence, but because your independence removes a role they've been playing without ever earning it. The version of you that needed their nod gave them purpose. The version of you that no longer needs it reminds them they never had that power to begin with. When you said it as a joke, they felt safe because it confirmed their assumptions. You weren't serious, you weren't capable, you weren't a threat to the stability of their influence. But when you started proving that you meant it, that you could walk without their permission, their comfort turned into insecurity. They can't admit it, so it shows up as weird behavior, forced support, sudden coldness, or that subtle resentment people think no one notices. People don't mind you growing. They mind when your growth stops orbiting around them. They preferred you small, not because small is better, but because small is easier to feel superior around. When you step out of that, when you stand on your own without checking back for applause or reassurance, they're left feeling unnecessary, and unnecessary is a feeling humans avoid at all cost. What you did wasn't just succeed. You outgrew a dependency they didn't realize they were leaning on. You became someone who defines their own worth, their own direction, their own standards. And that kind of autonomy exposes a truth they don't want to look at. Their approval was never something you needed, only something they enjoyed giving. So when they act shaken or distant or overly dramatic, remember this: they're not losing you. They're losing the version of themselves that felt important because you hadn't yet discovered your own power. Number 12. Your progress isn't embarrassing them, your irrelevance is. When people get uneasy watching you move forward, it's not because they're ashamed of you or intimidated by your success. It's because they suddenly realize they don't matter to the future you're building. And that discovery hits harder than any public achievement ever could. Humans crave relevance. We want to feel like we have a role in someone's story, even if it's a tiny one. When you're rising in ways they never predicted, they're forced to confront a truth they've been able to avoid for years. Their presence in your journey was optional, not essential. When you were smaller, when you were still figuring things out, they could feel involved. They could give advice, make jokes, critique, encourage, dismiss. All of it created an illusion of importance. They were part of the narrative because you hadn't yet written your own. But progress changes authorship. When you take ownership of your direction, when you stop using their opinions as milestones, when your path turns away from the comfort zone they occupy, they get pushed to the margins without any hostility, without any drama, without you even saying a word. What embarrasses them isn't that you're doing better. It's that they can't pretend their influence still matters. This hits the ego in a way failure never does, because failure lets them stay relevant through sympathy or advice. Success removes those tools. Success forces them to admit that their role was mostly noise, commentary without impact, presence without purpose. And when they feel irrelevant, they panic, because relevance is tied to identity. Without it, they feel like background characters in a story they thought they were co-starring in. So they get defensive, they get distant, they get strangely competitive, or they suddenly rewrite their own history to make it seem like they always believed in you. None of it is about you. All of it is about saving face in a moment where the truth is standing too close to ignore. You don't need them anymore, and they never actually earned a permanent place in your progress. This isn't cruelty. It's reality. When you grow, you don't just leave people behind. You reveal who was walking with you and who was only comfortable standing near you as long as you stayed the same. Number 13. Your growth didn't embarrass them. Your accuracy did. When someone laughs at you, they're not just laughing at the joke. They're laughing at their own confidence in understanding you. They believe they can read you like a book, page after page, predictable and safe. They feel smart, even superior in their assumptions. But when your growth lines up perfectly with something they dismissed, It's not embarrassment they feel. It's humiliation, the kind that stings because it exposes how little they actually understood. Accuracy is dangerous to people who mistake assumptions for truth. When you say something that sounds impossible and then slowly, steadily, undeniably make it real, you pull the rug from under their certainty. They can't hide behind "I didn't know" anymore, because you gave them the information. They can't pretend they were misled, because you told them exactly what you were aiming for, even if you said it with a smile and a joke. What they can't stand is the realization that their whole analysis of you was built on convenience, not clarity. They weren't reading you. They were reading what they wanted to believe. And when reality contradicts that belief, it feels like being caught talking loudly in a room where no one is listening. The room goes quiet, and suddenly every misplaced assumption echoes like a mistake they can't unhear. Your growth becomes a kind of proof they can't argue with. You didn't become impressive by surprise. You became impressive by being precise, by being aligned with something you stated long before they bothered to take it seriously. It forces them to confront a deeper truth. They weren't judging your potential, they were judging their own comfort. So they get defensive, they get awkward, they get overly supportive, or they get strangely absent. None of those reactions come from pride or jealousy or even insecurity alone. They come from being shown in living color that they were wrong in a way they never expected to be shown. Accuracy can't be laughed off. It can't be dismissed as coincidence. It can't be explained away. When someone's reality proves them right, it exposes every careless assumption around them. And that kind of exposure is something people never prepare for, not because it's harsh, but because it's true. Number 14. They laughed because you were early. They're shocked because you were right. There's a special kind of loneliness in being ahead of the moment you're standing in. When you said it as a joke, you weren't being dramatic or silly. You were speaking from a place they couldn't access yet. They laughed because the timing didn't match the truth. Early truth always feels like nonsense to people who can only understand what they can already see. They weren't laughing at you. They were laughing at the gap between where you were and where you knew you were going. People trust what they can measure. They trust what is already visible. They trust what fits inside their timeline, not yours. So when you spoke that line, they treated it like fantasy because, at that moment, it was invisible to them. Early vision is indistinguishable from imagination to anyone who hasn't trained themselves to look beyond the present. But time has a way of turning invisible things into undeniable things. When your actions started catching up to your words, when the joke started turning into evidence, suddenly the same people who couldn't take you seriously started losing their composure. Not because you changed, but because they were forced to accept that you saw something they didn't. And there is no feeling more uncomfortable than realizing someone understood their own trajectory better than you did, especially when you thought you understood them perfectly. They're shocked because being right exposes them in a way that being successful never could. Success can be explained away as luck, timing, connections, or coincidence. Being right exposes judgment. It exposes perception. It exposes how shallow their understanding really was. The truth is this: people don't punish you for dreaming. They punish you for dreaming before they can imagine it too. When you're early, you look foolish. When you're right, you look unstoppable. And the combination of those two is something most people can't handle without losing their emotional footing. They can't laugh anymore because laughter would admit they misread you. They can't dismiss it because reality is staring them down. They can't take credit because they never saw it. So they do the only thing they can do. They stare, they stumble, they scramble, and they finally understand that what they called a joke was always a forecast they failed to read. In the end, This isn't really about jokes or success, or even proving people wrong. It's about truth, the kind that hides in plain sight until life forces it into the open. It's about how people react not to who you are becoming, but to what your becoming reveals about them. Your growth shakes their comfort, exposes their assumptions, rewrites their narratives, reminds them of dreams they buried, and shows them a clarity they never bothered to look for. When they laugh, it's not always cruelty. Sometimes it's fear disguised as humor. When they panic, it's not always jealousy. Sometimes it's the sudden collapse of a story they built to make themselves feel safe. When they stare in shock, it's not disbelief. It's recognition. Recognition that you saw yourself before they ever bothered to, and you trusted it enough to follow through. So don't take their reactions personally. Take them as proof that you are moving, changing, growing, stepping into a version of yourself they can't yet explain. And that alone is enough to unsettle anyone who has spent too long standing still. Keep speaking your truth, even when it comes out sounding like a joke. Keep working when no one believes it. Keep becoming someone they can't fit into their old boxes, because the real victory isn't that you prove them wrong. It's that you prove yourself right. If this video gave you even one moment of clarity, one spark of motivation, or one reminder of who you really are, then it did its job. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep, honest, mind-shifting content. If you enjoyed it, like it. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with which point hit you hardest or what truth you've been hiding in jokes, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for being here. And remember, the truth always shows up, sooner or later. Stay awakened, chosen ones.